you do need to be quite technical to work in that space. If you don't understand the concepts, it's going to be very difficult to break into that space. I think that drive to get people to work together, to get people supported, it does mean that people will be more open to exploring different solutions. You would be joining a team of experts that are well regarded in the industry. So that's one big boost already.
Welcome to the MD podcast with me, Martin Hartley, Managing Director of Emagine. We're a professional services consultancy specializing in providing high value, low population SMEs to the financial services sector. Being a leader within the world's largest banking organizations is aspirational. However, few people make it to the top. The Emagine podcast will offer interesting, insightful and frank discussions on the biggest issues facing divisional directors and leaders of today. The show aims to inspire and educate future leaders by telling the career stories of those of today. And I can't wait for today's episode because I'm joined by Stefano Salvi, who is an SME and the head of Emagine's risk practice. Stefano, hey, how you doing?
Hi, very well, and you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Welcome to the show. As the listeners know, we look at the past, the present, and the future. We end with my favorite part of the show, which is a quick fire round. So I'll come to that all in due course. But first and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from? Where did you grow up? And then we'll obviously go through it like that.
So I born and raised until 14 in Italy. Parents immigrated to South Africa when I was 14, and I continued my studies there. I went into mathematics. That was a field I'd chosen, and as I got married quite young, I felt that the UK had quite a few opportunities, so I came to the UK in 1997. I wasn't too fussy about the work that I'd picked at the time, so I ended up being a DBA for BP in Aberdeen, of all places. I didn't even know Aberdeen existed when I came to and then slowly moved into the finance sector. I worked for Disney for a year and a half in London, and then started working for the Industrial Bank of Japan. Initially, it was a very technical development database role, but as time went on, I was seconded to the risk project, the main risk project to replace all the risk systems in the UK for Mizuho, and I worked on that from inception pretty much all the way until decommissioning. That gave me a good exposure to all sorts of risk measures, particularly on the middle office. They had a very wide set of products. They traded pretty much everything in London, which each one of them has its exigencies and difficulties. While I was there, the risk environment and platform and landscape changed quite a lot. The risk measures changed, credit risk becoming more important, much more important after 2007. Methodologies changed, technologies changed. So it's been quite an interesting environment in terms of not just the technology, but also the regulations. 2007 really kicked the hornet's nest.
Yep.
We were in a bit of a wild west before that, where people were quite happily trading and betting on products that nobody understood. And when people realized that nobody understood these products, then the regulators and risk methodologies had to become a lot more sophisticated in terms of pricing and risking. So that was the experience. After that, I went on to Credit Suisse. I was involved with the FRTB program over there, more from a management point of view, but then closely working with the market risk bonds.
Great. Just before we go any further, Stefano, obviously it's an interesting start there. Did you ever think you were going to get into the financial services sector or the IT sector when you were little? Were your parents thought processes like that, or?
No, I mean, I've always enjoyed mathematics. I always thought I was going to go into academia on the math side, but yeah, I have no regrets. I think I still find mathematics really interesting. It's just that the industry offers a lot of opportunities for growth, a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges, and mathematics is a very pure subject. almost you don't really care about reality when you do maths, right? You just invent your own systems and off you go. Whereas this has given me a lot more exposure to people.
Yeah.
I think it's been a good choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for obviously those starting their careers, did you purposely target big companies? Obviously, you went to BP, you went to Disney, you ended up at Mizuho. What was the thought process around that?
I didn't. Yet again, I started fairly young. I think I was quite naive. I think I was quite fortunate to go into the big companies. The landscape has changed quite a lot. I think some of the smaller companies now offer a lot of opportunities, but the big companies do have certain advantages. The training, the support, the exposure to more people at the top level, especially in finance sector.
Yeah.
You do work with a very high caliber people. You can learn a lot from them, and the company has a lot of practice in place, especially in terms of HR and training. And the smaller companies more dynamic. You might find it very interesting, exciting, but I think it's very easy to pick up some pretty bad habits if you're working for a small startup, because everybody's trying to work out what to do. So I think working for big companies has been pretty good.
Great. Okay. So you mentioned there, thanks for your thoughts and your insight on that as well. You mentioned an interesting transition at Mizuho. You went from a DBA developer technical role to more people management, project management, obviously at a more of a program level as well, managing the whole front to back risk platforms. Tell us what were the key learns and challenges that you faced going from pure technical to a people role, because it's a transition that a lot of people in your scenario want to take, but then it's also a lot that people shy away from.
Yeah, I think for that transition, you do need some aptitude. I think one of the common mistakes is where you get an excellent technician or somebody who's absolutely brilliant as an SME, and we assume that they'll be good managers. For me, it was a natural transition because I like working with people. I like understanding how people work, and my main driver is solving problems. So whether it's people-based problems or technical problems, I'm happy with that. If you do want to go up the management ladder, you will benefit from having a good technical understanding of either the finance or the technology or the language, but also you'd need to want to work with people, because it poses many a challenge. I mean, especially in IT, some people can be quite set in their ways. Some people can be very attached to the solution they're provided, and I think you need to make an effort to grow a collaborative environment and understand people's strengths and weaknesses, and play to the strengths, and support where they need support.
Yeah, I think it's something that we're looking at, aren't we? Obviously, internally at the moment with the one practice strategy and the promotion of team leads within the practices, which obviously you'll come on to tell us about. With heading up the risk practice at Emagine, and obviously within that we have the support aspect and support function as well. But it's we've found firsthand that it's not the best SMEs that will make the best team leads or managers, and equally they might not want to, or they might want to, but they've got a lot to learn, because it's not just about how good you are technically, it's about how good you are with people and understanding that emotional intelligence and spotting potential problems.
Precisely. I think the temptation for someone who's very good in the field is to fix the problem the way they've always fixed the problem, whereas you really do need to try and trust the team, get them to do it, even if it takes somewhat longer. Even a team of 5 will always be able to deliver more than a single person, no matter how brilliant they are. So it's that temptation to just step in and do it, which can sometimes alienate people. So it is about having a person first view of the team.
Nice. Okay, so you then go to Credit Suisse.
Yeah. After that, I went to Bank of America. I joined on a project to decommission one of the trading platforms.
Which is where our relationship first started with Emagine, yeah?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That was fairly brief actually, because I started, and then budget changes meant that the project was in question, but somebody else snapped me up, and I landed up working looking after the trader tools for front office developers in the linear rates space. It's quite a challenging environment in that obviously it's a fast moving environment. If there are issues, you need to try and solve them as quickly as possible. So you always need to find a solution and then find the longer term solution. When markets are busy, you can understand how important it is that the risk and P&L tools are all working correctly. And when things go wrong, you often have more than one desk applying a lot of heat. It's the first time I've worked at Bank of America. Is the first time I worked in a front office capacity, but I've learned a lot. It's very interesting to see it from the front office point of view, as well as the more traditional middle office risk management that I was looking at Zoha.
Okay, so that's an interesting point actually, because a lot of people will want to make that transition from middle or back office to front office. Talk us through the challenges you faced and how you've overcome them. What key learns we can give to the listeners.
So front office, I think what's important is to have your technical know-how up to scratch. Having done a CQF, that really helps, because I can look at the models, I can look at what the tools are doing. I can talk about the pricing, I can talk about the various risk factors, and so you do need to be quite technical to work in that space. If you don't know the jargon, if you don't understand the concepts, it's going to be very difficult to break into that space. So absolutely, something like the CQF or any reading you do will go a long way, because when you talk to traders, they want to talk to people who understand them. Because they are very busy. Yeah.
And what about the difference in pace? That's obviously where you were going to next. With they're very busy, potentially impatient. Like let's be honest.
Yeah. I have to say, there are a couple of less patient traders that we have. Traders had a bad reputation in the 80s. They've become a lot more tolerant, a lot more open-minded. They are generally very, very nice people who are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Busy.
I think a lot of the time is back in the day, it came down to a lack of understanding, a lack of collaboration. Now, you and the team we have deployed at Bank of America, you and your team and Harish's team, you sit next to the guys, you're on the floor to them, so they understand. So the information, the flow of information and the collaboration is there for everyone to be able to get along much better.
Precisely. That building of trust is paramount. Coming back to the change of pace, the first week I was working on these things, something wasn't working, and so I made a change on something that I knew nothing about. I didn't know how it worked and everything else. And my boss says, "Oh yeah, just deploy it." And coming from a middle office, rigorous, you get your Jira raised, you do your development, you unit tested, you dev tested, your system integration, all of that, which would take at least a couple of weeks before you deploy anything from inception. You go, but I just wrote 10 lines of code. I have no idea whether this is going to break anything, and you just want me to push it out so the traders can use it. So that was a big adjustment in terms of turning things around quite quickly. And now sometimes we deploy within minutes of finding the problem. That has its challenges, because obviously in terms of code quality review and all of that, you need to keep on top of it. It means that you have to be extremely careful with the changes you make, but that's quite dynamic. And then of course
it's really exciting.
Yeah. It is. But when there's a problem, you can't just go, yeah, okay, I'll raise a Jira and I'll have a look at it next week. It's got to be done now.
Absolutely. So then, looking at obviously your career history and what's happened, what the decisions you've made, the roles you've undertaken, the successes you've had, that's transpired. Obviously, you and I to work really closely together now as our risk practice lead, so which is good, which we're really enjoying. Obviously, what skills and what part of your experience has led you to this position, and what is it? Yeah, what's your vision for the practice moving forward?
Okay, so I think what has really helped me in the past, apart from arguably having the technical skills, is a genuine interest in trying to solve problems and help people. So whether the people in my team or my superiors, and I think that drive to get people to work together, to get people supported, to make people feel like we can work together towards a common goal. I think that's worked really well for me. I've always had good rapport with most people, and it does grease the wheels, but not in a dodgy used car salesman way. It really does help people collaborate. It does mean people have more time to listen to what you have to say, and it does mean that people will be more open to exploring different solutions. So I think that spirit of collaboration, that spirit of supporting people, has possibly been the most important thing in my career. I have transitioned from one role to another, and when I started in some of the roles, I knew nothing about the subject matter, but it's always been good to have people around you, and and you get there, and I think you deliver a lot more in that environment. In terms of the practice, that's exactly what I would like to try and foster, because we've touched upon the fact that some SMEs may be brilliant in what they do, but not necessarily good managers. Some of them are not necessarily good communicators, and not because they don't have the skills, but possibly they don't think that the knowledge that they have or the value that they add is something worth sharing with other people. I think sometimes people get very caught up with their own little world, and they do the job admirably well, but we're not exposing the level of knowledge and skill and yeah, the worth and value that these people have. And I think the practice is a perfect environment where we can highlight this level of knowledge, because, for example, I mentioned Credit Suisse FRTB. That is a massive regulation, and there are so many nuanced little things in there that only someone who has the skills, the interest, and has spent enough time to read through them and see the ramifications and the links within the regulation can give you a good in-depth even summary of what's happening. So having someone like that who spent days and days and weeks understanding the regulation, sharing what they've learned, and some of the nuggets that they've managed to panhandle out of the regulation can be invaluable for other people who are working within that context. So having this collaborative environment where we look for the SMEs, we look for those nuggets of knowledge, and we share them with other people is going to be great. The community can also help. I mean, some of the questions you ask, how can I help you? Sometimes you have interpersonal difficulties with your colleagues, with your boss, with your subordinates, if you're managing people. Having another ear of someone say, look, I've had this, how about this, how about that? Having that environment, yet again, that can help you resolve these issues is important, because we work in an environment where, talking about risk, I mean, support is just as complex, where you have to have the knowledge, you are working with people, there's a lot going on, and so having some peers who understand where you're coming from and who can maybe suggest ways to go forward means that you can solve these problems, because at the end of the day, these are just problems to solve, right?
Yeah, so I suppose that's one of the benefits of of the Emagine risk practice is that we have SMEs in the majority of the different segments within risk.
Yeah.
So there is somebody we can go and speak to, somebody that can explain it, somebody that can cross-train and upskill, and we can make sure that the matrix of the teams that we deploy is relevant with certain skill sets from all angles in there. So I mean, if we
Yeah.
look at just some of the projects we've got ongoing with FRTB, from the development of it to the regulation side, the development of risk calculators, decommissioning 3 and into 1. We've got the SACVA stuff. We've got a whole host of different projects at different organisations which allow us to have that knowledge internal and that IP that we can therefore share and make sure that we're upskilling all of our consultants and therefore passing that knowledge on to our clients. Is difficult to contain that in, it's difficult to build that amount of knowledge in one area if you're a direct client. You mentioned there a lot about if someone was to join, like you mentioned like the economy. Tell us a bit more about your thoughts on the whole gig economy and what consultants will get from joining the risk practice at Emagine.
There are probably 2 major benefits. The one is that they would be working with the top 10 of the SMEs in the industry.
Yeah.
So you would be joining a team of experts that are well regarded and known in the industry. That label will get applied to you as well, and so that's one big boost already, because people tend to have more time for you when they think that you know what you're doing. The second is
so then the top 10%, because obviously Emagine only hire the top 10% of consultants to be deployed, regardless of their bracket.
Yeah. And then of course the breadth of clients that Emagine has. So by joining the practice, you get exposed to different clients where you could land up working. That is great. They also will be doing things in a different way, and I think that the opportunity for learning from the different client sides, but also the opportunity for remuneration and growth are quite high. So I think the elite team and the exposure to multiple clients and then the way they do things would be great things for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think like a lot of people know much about our internal training that's on offer and our bi-weekly meetups where for the whole part of the one practice strategy, we had David, who's obviously our development practice lead, last week, upskilling and training the guys on KDB development. Obviously we've had you rolling out agile best practices and so on. So it's the fact that you're obviously getting exposure to SMEs, the top 10% of the market, and getting that obviously that training and that upskilling as well, and being part of that community, being part of something that's bigger than yourself. Obviously, most of the guys are still deployed out on site, but there's still that open, clear communication channel that allows us to be one practice.
Yeah, that is invaluable. I think that is invaluable. The being able to learn from the practices, from the fortnightly practice meets, where you learn about stuff that you may not have even thought about, but also that community. It can be a pretty lonely place out there sometimes when you get dropped into a project, or when you think you're doing it all on your own. Having a bunch of peers around you is great.
Yeah, exactly. So what does the future look like for the risk practice?
I think for me the one key thing is to really get hold of that knowledge, those nuggets that I was talking about earlier, where we have very, very capable, very, very knowledgeable people who have some good understanding of the key regulations and risk practices that are there, and to share those and to get those more widely distributed, or to really start the practice and point out, look, FRTB, risk factor eligibility test, simple short paragraph in here, but these are the ramifications, that kind of thing. I'd like to get those documented, certainly on the fortnightly sharing of knowledge. That'll be great. But I think I want to evidence that knowledge SME gold that we have, and it really needs to be disseminated, and
Yeah, and I think it's also the breadth of what we can cover, but still being specialists, isn't it? It's like, you know, we've got SMEs on everything from LIBOR to FRTB to SACVA, but then obviously we've got RAD development, desk side development, you know, trader support, and then we've got our application support team, which are right in the mix between e-trading and risk, and obviously because risk is that golden thread that runs throughout our value propositions and all of our clients' headaches. So it's something to take into consideration across the board. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Looking at yourself then, what do you want to be doing from now over the next 3 years? How does your role change? How does it evolve? What does it look like?
So I think the challenges now is setting up the infrastructure, getting the right people in the right place, talking to the various people, and getting that excitement about what's going to happen. Once we have that, I think growing the practice, getting the Emagine name better known across the industry, making us the well, not the de facto experts, but certainly the ones that people think about when they say, okay, this regulation, that we need people here, we need people there. Right, these guys came in, they knew what they were doing, they delivered, and we're very capable. So yeah, so it's getting the name out there, but I think it has to start from the grassroots.
Yeah, and I think it's that
we have and grow them.
Absolutely, yeah. It's what we've obviously been talking about. Is that being that disruptor? So the Big Four isn't the natural place to go or have to go.
Yeah.
You know, we are very much a listening consultancy. So, you know, it's about understanding, listening. Obviously, we've got the agile practice where those guys go and do that on a daily basis, and rather than giving the McKinsey blueprint or, you know, the Accenture way, like this is what you must do, it's, hey, we'll listen, understand your problem, work together, we'll give you recommendations, but obviously it's trying to solve a problem in the best way that collaborates the two organizations. So Emagine and you, ex-bank, rather than saying you do it our way because we know best, it's that collaboration piece and that understanding and that listening aspect that I think will allow us to disrupt the thought process and the thinking of, hey, let's just go straight to the Big Four. So yeah, I'm excited to see that journey. I'm excited to obviously to have you on board and be part of it.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Look, we'll get to my favorite part of the podcast now, which is the quick fire round, right? So,
okay.
3 pieces of advice you would give your younger self or someone just starting out. Hit me.
Right. Don't lose sight of work-life balance.
Nice.
Remember, everybody you work with will at some point you'll come up against. Sometimes people that worked for you you'll be working for in the future. And yeah, just make the most of your colleagues, because you spend a heck of a lot of time at work.
Like it. 3 really good important aspects there. Okay, a source or 2 that you use for self-development. Can be a podcast, can be a book, can be a website.
Yeah, I have used Pluralsight quite a lot. They have some very good courses on there that tend to be on the pricey side, but very good. And then I have a fairly eclectic set of interests. So I love books. So I'm an avid book buyer, and when I retire, I'll get to read all of them, I'm hoping.
You sound like my wife. I'm the same in terms of an avid book buyer, but I don't go on enough holidays to read them all.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, cool. Any in particular that has stood out to you?
In terms of books? Sorry, this is a bit esoteric. It's The Feeling of What Happens by Damasio, which talks about how how analog the brain is and how we make sense of reality.
Nice. That sounds really interesting. Okay, and last but not least, then your role model, who and why?
Good grief. Well, this guy wasn't famous, but I worked with a chap in IT when I first started, who was at the time about 45, and he had a PhD in botany, and had been managing the Kruger National Park for about 20 years, and then decided he wanted to make some money. So he went into IT, but he was fantastic. He was absolutely brilliant, self-taught, but he had such a good. He was so methodical about everything he did, and he had such a nice way with people that he just managed to bring together teams, and they did some of the best analysis work I've ever seen. So yeah.
Great, that's a really good one. I like that. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for being on the show. I think that last point there will prove to the listeners that we don't preempt anything. Even though we work together, I haven't given you a list of questions or anything to answer, so we caught you completely off guard there, which was great. Obviously, anyone that's interested in our risk or support practices can reach out to you, or anything you've said on the podcast today can reach out to you on LinkedIn. I'm sure they will get your details. But it's been a pleasure. So thanks for sharing your insights and your thoughts. Good luck with the risk practice. I'm looking forward to seeing that grow and working with you on that. So that's great. And to the listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed listening. If you've enjoyed it, please share and pass the pod. But obviously, don't tell Crouchy's legal team that I said that. Thanks.